All right, so it's April 4th. A couple of interesting things going on, or things I wanted to discuss. One was I had some problems with my epoxy over here. Not this board here, this is the one I put in today, but I put these two boards, this one here, this 8 or 10 foot or whatever it is, and that 20 footer here I put in a couple days ago. It's tacky in some places. It's not bad in other places, and then I don't know if you can see this or not, but look at that. It's still tacky. Now, the thing is, it's tacky in the places where I had liquid resin. It's perfectly solid in the places where I have the thickened epoxy. So if you get to a spot where there's thickened epoxy, like a little bit dripping out here, then everything on the top side is completely hard. But all this stuff along the bottom where it was liquid resin is soft. And here where this is going to be hard. That there's all hard. So I don't know what happened. Now I had used a little bit of old hardener. It's a 3-to-1 mix, 3 parts resin to 1 part hardener, medium hardener. I've never had any issues with it before, but it was a jug of, I don't know how old. So, and maybe it's got a lifespan. I keep it pretty well stored. I mean, it's in the dark, climate controlled. I had this when I built my other boat one time too. I was covering the hull, and I had already glassed the hull, and I was putting a couple of top coats of epoxy on to fill the weave for sanding. And one of those coats did just exactly this. It stayed tacky and gummy, and you could, it was either scrape it off, or if you tried to sanding it off, it just gummed up the sandpaper instantly. I don't know what the cause was then. I suspected maybe it was humidity levels. I did it in the late winter, so gosh, you wouldn't think humidity would have been an issue, but it was a propane heater in there, and but the whole thing, it was multiple batches. The whole hull did that on that day that we did that, or I did that. It was a mess, and I wound up spending days. Used vinegar to scrub and used a lot of sandpaper, and went through a lot of sandpaper to get that back down to good. And I even tried putting a little fresh epoxy over on a spot, letting it cure and see what happened, and it didn't do the trick. So same thing here. And this was multiple mixes, or 2 mixes of epoxy, and they both did the same thing. This first board I had a mix of epoxy, then this second board I had a mix of epoxy. They both did the same thing. They're gummy down here and nice and dry and hard up here. So environmental, I mean, so it couldn't have been my mixing. I mean, why would the stuff up here be, was the hardener? They say you have to agitate the hardener, shake it, which I do every time before I pour it. And they say you don't need to do it but once when you get it, and then again if it sits for a long time. But so I don't know. Fortunately, the thickened epoxy, which I put on the boards before I put them together, cured, and so it's, well, and frankly the epoxy wouldn't need to be there anyway. It's all screwed in, so I mean it's not going to fall apart regardless. But it's just kind of unfortunate you go to that trouble and then you wonder about it. But anyway, I did a batch today for this board back here, and I switched out my hardeners, and this stuff is already, it was already starting to set up as I was finishing, so I'm sure that'll be good. But anyway, so the first strake is on the port side now, and while I'm waiting for that to cure, I've been contemplating how to line out the planking. So I got a second plank up and kind of in position, checking it out here. And what I did, this is a 6-inch plank or a 5.5-inch actual. I tapered this from the 5.5 to the 3.5 down here. And then a 2x4 can continue on. And that's kind of what I'm thinking. Steelers, they call them. But I'm going to need a lot of them. And frankly, the 2-inch gain I get up the bow isn't going to be enough. I won't have enough strakes or enough layers, going up to make up all that difference. Because if you remember what my layout looks like, it gets very narrow, 29 inches at the stern, up to like 70 inches at the bow, and it's a pretty consistent taper. So it's going to need a lot of strange planking to make it work, and I decided I better start now. So I cut this first one with taper, but it's only a 2-inch taper, so I need more. I think I should get some wider stock. I'm going to need more planking stock anyway, but I think I should get more wider stock, because if I cut it down to the 3.5 inches, of a 2x4, then it will, be wider than at the bow end, and it'll give me more taper. But of course, you can't have all the taper right here in one spot, because then it would just taper to a point in the middle of the boat, and before it gets to the aft where it starts getting narrow again. So what I was thinking about doing to try to minimize waste when I cut those tapers out of those boards, of course using bigger boards is going to help, but what I could do is start staggering them, the tapered boards. So if I put another 6-inch one on here, I could put a regular 6-inch wide board back the first 8 feet or whatever, and then start the taper at 8 feet going back, and then do the next row up, do it again, and continue that on, so it brings that, it flattens out the curve, so to speak, or the angle or the taper of the planking, so it moves that thicker part farther back as you go. And then once you get 3 or 4 spaces back, or whatever you need to do to get to the middle of the boat here, then start over again up at the bow. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Of course, down here, it's, like I said, I think I'm going to have to do the same thing on the stern here, because that's such a narrow area there. Either I'm going to wind up having little, planks that end, curving up into the shear line there, which I would have to cut off at a sharp angle. I really don't want to do that. Not that I think that would be the end of the world in a boat like this, with plywood going on over top of it. But I still don't want to do that, so I'm thinking I'm going to have to probably taper them the other direction back here a little bit, and there'll be a lot of spiling at some point, I'm sure. So I don't know, it may be an odd looking planking job. Well, I'm sure it will be, but it really doesn't matter, because it gets covered with plywood and then fiberglass cloth. This is Moose. Say hello, Moose. Yeah, thank you. What do you think? Yeah, what do you think? You want attention, don't you? Yeah? You just want attention. Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, careful, that's paper there. It'll fall off the edge. You're a little bit of a klutz anyway, you know that, don't you? Yeah, you're just a little bit of a klutz. That's why we call you Moose. You're big and klutzy, so you're a moose. Yeah. Anyway, so those are the plans right now. And getting these planks up here is the next thing. I made a little jig here to screw into the frame. Oh, there it is. You can see it just keeps the board in there loosely, so I can get it in position. And then once it's up there, I can trim it for the angle to get into the rabbet there. And then I'll start screwing and clamping at the bow, and then work my way back, bend the board on and pull it down. Use clamps to pull these together. Although it's not that bad in through here. I mean, there isn't really a whole lot of curve to this hole until you start getting back there towards the stern. So it's not these 2x6s, 2x10s, whatever. 2x8s maybe. I don't know. I'll have to order some, because this is all Douglas fir. Nobody stocks much of it. So I'll probably have to order some this week so I can start making these wider planks. Get those tapers cut into them. But that's the plan at the moment. And I still need to, before I get too far, I still need to finish getting the bevel on these frames going up. I beveled them, you know, properly down here, but that was only as far as I could reach on whatever I was standing on at the moment. So that needs to be a lot of work done there too. Yeah, this may take a little longer than I thought. And then of course I got to cut that rabbet out, and that's, you know, a bit of work every time you notch that rabbet out a bit farther too. That probably takes 20 or 30 minutes to get that notched out. And then fighting these boards, then if almost all these boards are going to have to be cut to, yeah, it's going to be a slow process. And it's a pretty long boat too, so there's a lot of boards that need to go on it. Yeah, I've been thinking and reading. I looked on several different books on planking and, you know, what they said to do. And here's the jug of suspicious. Bad? Don't know. Don't know what it was that caused that. It's a mystery. And I looked at the humidity too, and it was only 40% humidity in here, so it shouldn't have been a humidity issue. But it's still probably not very humid. It's reading 45 and 41. So that really shouldn't be an issue. And I mix all the batches the same amount, so it shouldn't be a mixing issue either. Well, all right. I'm sure things will go a little faster and a little better after I kind of get this figured out. But oh, another thing, I don't think I'm going to use epoxy to glue these. I mean, they just suggest bedding them. Or actually, he didn't even say you needed to bed them. He was just putting the copper naphthate on there. But a lot of people bed them. Yeah, klutz. You just want to be where I can pet you, don't you? But I think I'm gonna glue them. I'm gonna use some construction adhesive from here on out. That stuff has got enough gap filling abilities, and it's pretty strong. And once it's cured, it's waterproof. So it'll serve the function of waterproofing the joint, you know, filling any gaps, and also make the hull stronger. Of course, epoxy would do the same thing, but boy, I tell you what, if I gotta mix a batch of epoxy for each one of these boards, and, yeah, it's gonna take me forever and cost all that much more. And that's another thing too, is the price of wood now. You're talking like a 2x10, like a 16-foot 2x10 is $50, $50 or $60, something like that. Holy crap. So I don't want to waste any more than I absolutely have to. Of course, cutting these slivers out of here, you know, these angles in here, there's not much you can do, but I thought maybe a guy could cut, you know, just diagonally across the board. And you could do that, and you could use both pieces. But the issue there is, then how do you join something up at this other end? Well, then you gotta offset something, and then you got another weird joint you gotta cut, and the next board has to be, yeah, that would be a jigsaw puzzle is basically what that would lead to. So by cutting these down to the next, you know, the smaller board size, it should make it easier. Because you can just run the next, you know, a 2x4 right off here then. And then, like I said, if I move back the angled boards in sequence, not that I'm going to have that perfectly plotted out, so it's going to be kind of winging it, but I'll just start out what looks good. And like I said, I'll have to spile some of the planks anyway, I'm sure, so at some point I'll have to just take measurements and cut the planks to fit the holes. So that would be my update.